haven't really seen a lot of these people that are online, so it's cool to see some familiar names. Thanks for everyone for jumping on and listening to me, whatever I may have to say.
Well, mate, it's fantastic to always have these conversations, and through as you may have seen and noticed, coaches, the Zoom space has really evolved, and we thought it'd be a good idea to put this in a conversation format rather than a webinar, because it would be a lot more engaging. And rather than Shaun doing a knowledge dump, we can kind of pick his brain about things. And the way we're going to go about this, I'll throw some questions to Shaun. If you have any questions for him, please put them in the direct message chat down below. So if you move your screen, you'll see a chat function. Just press on that and then just find my name in the blue little box where it says Jared Moore. And then as we get to the Q&A section at the end, that will give me time to kind of scroll through the questions and throw them over to Shaun. So this will go for about 45 minutes, coaches. I don't want to waste any more time. And as you may know, in your experience of running a Zoom, please keep yourself on mute, because I would hate to break the internet in the middle of this Zoom call. But yeah, I'm going to get stuck into it. And Shaun, to get started with the questions, mate, what has it been like working for a great NBL coach such as Brian Goorjian, and what makes Gorge such a great coach, mate?
I'm not going to lie, mate. It's been unbelievable. So last year when I came on, every day, it's as surreal as the one before and the one that's coming up. As you can probably imagine, he has this reputation of being the greatest coach of all time in Australian basketball, and it's one thing to hear it or read about it, but then when you actually see the man, the myth, the legend in the flesh, working every single day, like I said, it's been a surreal experience, and it still has been. And I think, I would encourage you to, because he's going to speak on Wednesday, and you'll get a better understanding of perhaps how I feel about coach from hearing him speak. But for me, the biggest thing that I kind of recognized or saw coming in, he's 67, I think turning 68 this year. And he is as hard a worker that I've ever come across in basketball. He's 68. He gets on the court every day. And when I say get on the court, yeah, he's coaching. I don't mean he sits down on a chair. I mean, he's up, he's moving up and down. He's energetic. He brings great juice and jam to the session. He's personable every day. You wouldn't know if he's had a bad morning or a bad day the day before. He's consistently excitable every single day. And practice ends, who needs shots? He's rebounding. He's passing. Every single game we play, he cuts. Didn't matter whether it was the first game of the season, midway through the season, in the playoffs. He cuts every single game we play. He watches every single practice that we have as a team. He watches all the individual edits that are sent his way. And to see someone be able to do that and maintain that, as well as having to take on a lot of the other responsibilities that he needs to take on as a head coach, was unbelievably amazing. And once again, I would encourage anyone here to listen to him speak on Wednesday, because I'm lucky enough where I get to see him every day, and every team meeting we have or every individual conversation we have, it always feels really special. And he has a real natural knack of making you feel like that you mean something to him, irrespective of who you are or what you may do. And predominantly last year for me, I had dual roles. So I was an assistant coach and a team manager, but I'm not going to lie. A lot of the coaching was done by him and Jacob Jackomas. So practice is set up, packed down, put out towels, pack away towels, fill up bottles. And he made me feel like the most special kind of team manager / assistant coach that's ever existed. And I think it's that ability that really makes him great, because, yeah, I feel that way, but that's how players 1 through to 12 feel. That's how our training players feel. That's how our development players feel. That's how the young kids that come in for a one-off session to fill in feel. They feel special. He makes you feel like you're valued. And I think that's what makes him such a great, amongst other things, I think that's what makes him such a great coach.
Yeah, wow. I mean, we're so lucky to have him so close to us in New South Wales. And coaches, I know it's said over and over again, but taking the time to invest in our own coach development and having someone like Brian Goorjian on our doorstep is definitely an opportunity that you don't want to forget and miss. And I'm sure there have been many takeaways, mate. But I know last year was your first year as an assistant coach in the NBL. What were your biggest takeaways from that first season?
I mean, we were lucky, Jared, that we had a talented team, but I felt like we overachieved, given what we had, especially the way our kind of roster trickled out about halfway through the season, where we lost some guys for various reasons. I thought Coach Goorjian did a tremendous job of bringing us together, and I thought we overachieved. And I think the reason why we were able to hang with some of the better teams, and this is my biggest takeaway, number one, when I was a junior coach, I didn't really focus a lot in hindsight on defense, team D, individual D. It was something that I knew was important, and that I knew we had to be good at if we wanted to win championships and win games. But seeing this thing kind of firsthand up front, defense wins championships, individual defense, team defense gets it done at the end of the day. And if you look at the 4 teams that finished top 4, Melbourne, tremendous defensively. They had tremendous individual defensive players. They had a tremendous team defensive philosophy that everyone bought into. Perth, no different. Southeast Melbourne, no different. And then us, no different. And I think biggest takeaway for me, that's the first one. If you want to be competitive against the best teams, you have to be able to defend. You have to be able to stop the other team from scoring the ball. And with that, every team had their own individual philosophy. It wasn't every team had the same coverages on how they guard pick and roll, how they want to run defensive transition. Every team had a unique identity. I think what set the better teams apart from the not so good teams or the teams that didn't make finals was the coaching and the ability to perhaps emphasize those things and have an element of consistency of those things every single session, every single game. And I think that's biggest takeaway number one for me. The second thing, fundamental skill dictates what you can and can't do. So I know with a lot of the courses that you're running, Jared, and a lot of these coaches have probably participated in, and it was no different when I was running them once upon a time. But there's that Super 6, shoot, dribble, pass, pivot, one-on-one defense, decision making. Those 6 things I found. I mean, it sounds really obvious and it sounds really silly, like, oh yeah, you got to be good at those 6 things. But we play games and you watch professional players, or you scout teams and you see other professional players that can't do some of those things. And it'll A, hinder their ability to get on the court. And then B, it'll hinder their team's overall ability to be competitive in games. So, I know a lot of people speak about fundamental skill development and how important it is, but it became really apparent for me in a truly must-win environment, which is what professional basketball is, how important it was, or it is. And then the third piece to that, and I think it kind of flows on, is conceptual skill and understanding will dictate the depth of your team's offense and defensive schemes and philosophy. So if you have 10 players that all understand a general understanding of how to play pick and roll or be involved in pick and roll or play off the ball in pick and roll, you're going to be a really good pick and roll team. If you only have one player that can, you're going to be really limited in what you can do in the pick and roll. Defensively, if you have, 2 of your 12 guys that kind of understand rotating off the ball, how to close out, how to gap their man, how to carry a hand, how to go from a closeout to a ball stance. If you only have 2 out of 12 guys that can do that, you're going to be really limited with what you can do defensively, as opposed to if you have a whole team that understands those things. And I thought that our group as a whole, we were able to, we might not have been as skilled, but I thought our conceptual skill and understanding was as good as some of those better teams. We had multiple guys that could play off the on ball. We had multiple guys that knew how to screen and roll or screen and pop. We were lucky to have the defensive player of the year, but we also had other supplementary pieces defensively who knew how to pressure the ball in the backcourt, who knew how to plug in the backcourt, who knew how to close out on a shooter or close out on a non-shooter, and then how to contain them. And that's what kind of made us, I thought, successful defensively from a team kind of perspective. So they're my 3 biggest takeaways. Defense wins championships and games, fundamental skill, and conceptual skill and understanding.
Yeah, I loved how you phrased in a must-win environment, fundamental skill is big, because it really showed in the stats. I mean, in the advanced stats, your Hawks had the second lowest turnover rate in the league last season, which truly showed that your team really valued that defensive side of the basketball, and that was obviously just behind Perth. But how did you, as a coaching staff and your team, teach this part of the game to keep turnovers so low at 10.4 per game? And what could junior coaches do to also keep their team's turnover rate low?
It's a great question, because when I was involved with junior basketball, so I've been lucky enough to coach under 12s, under 14s, 16s, 18s, youth league, a wide breadth of age groups. And I always thought it was, we got to be better with our passing. We got to be better at our ball handling to turn the ball over less. And those things are true. And those things are really important. But I think what I found at this level, shot selection, number 1. So who shoots the ball, where, and when? Does everyone have the green light to shoot any shot under the sun at any point in an offensive possession? If the answer is yes, it becomes really hard to know where your shots are coming from when you're playing off the ball, where you might need to run or move to when shot goes up in defensive transition. And with that is the coaching element. So when we talk about shot selection and knowing where your shots are coming from and how that influences turnovers, it's video with individuals, it's video as a team with the head coach, with the assistant coaches. And if it's an individual issue, it's probably done one-on-one, sit down with a laptop in the locker room, away from everyone else. We might be looking at edits from the last game. We might be looking at edits from the last practice. And it might be as simple as, hey, man, I get that that's something that you want to do, but it's not the best type of shot for you right now if we're serious about winning. If we're not, all good, right? Then the third one is the decision-making element. So Coach Gorgon talks about it all the time. It's understanding what you're looking at and then what the counter or reaction is. So if we're playing in pick and roll in the middle of the floor and they're trapping or hard showing, so there's a lot of pressure on the ball handler, well, there needs to be a series of, cues that the ball handler needs to be looking at to understand where the ball needs to go. If that's taken away, what's open? And that was probably the biggest one for me in junior basketball with whatever offensive system that I ran. I probably didn't teach enough what you should be looking at. So if it was, I'm driving a baseline, so ball gets skipped, I'm driving a baseline, right? So the biggest thing I felt with young kids was driving with their head down. And that's an obvious one. So, get your eyes up, get your eyes up. And that's the right cue, but get your eyes up and look at what? So yeah, you're looking at the rim to score. And the assumption is you've beaten your player, and that's why the driving lane's open. But now what are you looking for when you're about upon arrival? So if you see 3 people flying at you, well, there's a decision that happens from there. All right, this guy's rotating across. That means that person is open. I need to find that person and get him or her the ball. Oh, him or her isn't open. Now where does the ball go? What's open now? And that's where, going back to the video is massive. Because a lot of the time at practice, it's easy is the wrong word. It can be challenging to ask questions after players have done a certain thing. So if someone's driven baseline and thrown the ball and they've turned it over, there's great value in asking that player, what did you see? Why did you throw that pass? But depending on the age group and the caliber of player that you're coaching, it can be common to get, I don't know, right? But now if you're able to, okay, no worries. Film practice, I get that clip out, I sit down. This is what the video shows. You've driven baseline, this person's rotated across. This is what you should be looking at. The next option is that pass, boom. And then you evolve it from there. So in regards to turnovers and having a really low turnover rate, I think for us, it was understanding where coaching shot selection and coaching it hard. Not everyone gets to shoot the same type of shot on the floor every single possession. Some people are going to have a green light, some aren't in certain situations. As a team, knowing where our shots are coming from and what we prioritize and value. And then thirdly, the decision-making component. And then if you have the ability to linking it with video, being able to sit down with a player and talk through some of the decisions that they may have made in a game that were both good and maybe poor, and then what adjustments that we can make.
Yeah, I love that, mate. I love what you said about teaching players to read the game, because a master coach once taught me that basketball is about creating space, reading space, and attacking space. And it's that reading space component that is really one of the trickiest things to master, but then articulate that to the players so that they understand. The stats were also interesting because it also clearly showed that, as you brought up before, that the team takes a lot of pride on the defensive end of the ball, being ranked first in steals per game, second in blocks per game, and had the second best defensive rating in the league. I mean, that's rather impressive. How did the coaching staff really get the team to buy into this value? And how was this taught on a daily basis?
Well, look, I'm going to start with this, Jared. So we were lucky enough we had the Defensive Player of the Year, and that a lot of the time is going to solve a lot of problems that any team may have on the defensive end of the floor. And Justin Simon was tremendous. His feel defensively in one-on-one matchups with anyone that he had to guard tended to be the best player on the opposition team. His feel on who they were, what they could do and what they can't do, and how he could take advantage of that player was like nothing I've ever seen. And that's why he's the Defensive Player of the Year. Tremendously talented. But it isn't always about one player. We had one guy, he made it special. But as a team defense was emphasized, and so was individual defense, but it was emphasized quite literally every single session, whether it was preseason or regular season or in the postseason. So when we played in the semis, that was a focus every single session. Now, that doesn't mean we talk about the same defensive scheme every single day. what it does mean is that there is a defensive element or focus every single session. So, what we did do a lot was shell drill and variations of shell drill. We didn't do a lot of, I'll talk about the preseason first because we're in it right now. So there's a lot of one-on-one. There's a lot of two-on-two. And there is a ton of three-on-three. And within that three-on-three environment, there's a lot of talk of how we guard the ball in the catch. So they haven't dribbled the ball yet, how we defend, how we close out, so how we get there upon arrival. And then when the ball does move and someone drives it in that three-on-three environment, how we rotate and talk and play out of that. And that's featured, I think we're 7 or 8 weeks into preseason, like formal preseason. And we've done 3-on-3 shell where we work on those 3 things. I'd probably say if we train 4 times a week, 3 out of the 4 weeks. And on that one session where we're not doing 3, it's 4-on-4 shell, or it's 2-on-2, or there's a greater focus on 1-on-1. And I think everyone here knows that whatever you decide to emphasize and focus on and hone in on, you're going to be good at. And that's something that Coach Gorgon focused and emphasized on throughout the entire season. And our season last year, it got stretched out, it got delayed. It was really long. And you would think, I know for me, in the seasons that I've participated in, junior seasons, sometimes I just get over those things and I want to do something else. And I think that's the difference between the great ones and the good ones. It's no, I understand what it takes to win. And this is something that I know that is required to win. And we're going to do it. And we're going to be great at it. And I'm going to coach you hard. It doesn't matter if you're Tyler Harvey, our starting point guard, or Lachlan Den, our development player. I am going to coach you hard on the defensive end every single session. There's no let up, because for us to be great and be a great team and put ourselves in a position to compete and win, we have to be able to defend as a team. We have to be able to pressure the ball. And I'm sure that that is a staple of Coach Gorgon's teams throughout the years. And from what I understand, it has been. And I feel like that's a big part of why we were able to have a lot of success on that side of the floor. The second component, and I mentioned it before in the last question, there's a lot of video done with the team and with individuals on the defensive side of the game. And I remember my colleague, Jacob Jacomas, was doing a video session with, I'll leave him unnamed, but with one of our younger players last year. And he came into this meeting, he was really eager, he had a notepad, he was ready to go. And then they did, 15, 20 minutes of video with conversation. And Jacob said, the way he tells the story is he said he was done. And then the player said, oh, but we're not doing anything on offense. And he looked at him and he goes, no, it's the Illawarra Hawks. We're going to be really good at this. I know you can shoot the ball. I know you can play off a pin down, but you can't do this. And that's why we're going to focus on that. And then the third part of it, consistency. So the way he coached our team from day one, from this specifically defensively from day one to the very end of the season, didn't change a lot. There were no surprises. Everyone was held to the same standards and expectations every single day. It didn't change a lot. And it didn't matter if you were the best player, the worst player, development player, training player, everyone got coached hard. So I think, in hindsight, when I look at why we did have a lot of success on the defensive end, I think it was those things, and doing those things consistently in the day-to-day.
Oh, fantastic, mate. I mean, we all speak about it as coaches, that defense is so important to our team and for our team to succeed, but then putting it in the everyday is a lot harder than it seems. So thank you for sharing that. And And I know there are other things that you'd probably like to share, and I'm sure one of them is, after witnessing the habits of professional players at the Hawks, what advice would you provide aspiring junior players that are seeking to reach that pro level?
So I was lucky enough last year and this year as well, we have a lot of youth. So we have guys that have, when I say recently, maybe in the last 3, 4, 5 years, been at the Institute of Sport. They've gone and played Division One college, and they've come into this thing as a first year pro or a first year DP. And one of the coolest things that I've seen, because I think we've got a really good young core group of players that are hungry to get better every single day. And one of the coolest things to watch is a young man, and no different, I'm sure, with a young woman who just wants to get something out of every single session. It doesn't matter if it's team practice, it doesn't matter if it's team shoot around, it doesn't matter if it's extra afternoon shooting, it doesn't matter if it's pre-practice skill development. They're there to get better. And they know, or I feel that they know, the time is the greatest currency available. And if you waste your time, you're wasting precious moments to get better. So the first piece of advice, I guess, that I would give to any young player or aspiring player, it doesn't really matter if it's a local comp, if it's a 6:30 SPP session or a DAP session, if it's a rep game or a rep training session. You have set periods of time where you have a group of people or a coach that has devoted time and committed to help you get better. And I think if you can look down the path and understand or figure out in your mind that this is going to help you get better down the track, and you can buy into getting the most out of that session, and you can do that on a day-to-day for 6, 7, 8, 9 years, that's what makes you special. It's a process over outcome type of approach. And I know for young athletes, perspective and understanding time and years can be really hard to understand. And part of that is it's education from the coach and from parents, which I'm sure a lot of young athletes get. But the special ones, they're able to figure that out at a young age. And so one of the guys that we're lucky enough to have with our team, his name's Isaac White. Young, he's probably 22. He played 3 years at Stanford, which is a Division One. He represented South Australia Metro and South Australia at a bunch of national championships. But he's a relatively small, chunky, undersized guard. And he has to be one of the hardest, smartest, most diligent workers that I've ever come across. And I'm not too privy of what his junior basketball kind of career was like from a training perspective, other than kind of conversations that I've had with coaches that have been around him. But if what he is now is what he was like as a junior, I understand why he's a good player. I understand why he's a good shooter, because he probably got in the gym every single day and worked on his craft. It wouldn't surprise me if he made over 1,000 jump shots a week for years. And that, I think, being able to apply that mindset over a long period of time is what is any sort of advice that I would give to any sort of young player. You're not going to become a great Division One college player for working hard for 1 year. You're not going to become an NBL player or an NBA player or a professional basketball player for working hard top age under 18s. It's the body of work in under 14s. It's the body of work in under 16s. It's the body of work in under 18s And it's not even just all the stuff that you do on court, it's all the ancillary stuff around it. How you eat, how you sleep, how you look after your body, how you prepare for games, how do you look after yourself after games. It's all of those things that's going to help you become the best possible version of yourself, and have any sort of long basketball career. So, there's some of the habits that I've seen from our young core group of guys here. And if you're able to emulate any of those types of things, you will have success. But it's a body of work over a long period of time, and that's the biggest thing I would. When I was involved with young kids, that's what I would try and preach. It's not about being good this weekend. Let's get you good, 4 or 5 years time, when you finish with junior basketball and you transition off to collegiate basketball or professional basketball or whatever it is.
Yeah, there is no secret, mate. Just focus on the here and now and put in the work. I really love that message. That's really strong. Coaches, we have a couple more questions, and I see there in the chat there are a couple more questions coming through, which is great. We'll probably have around 5 to 10 minutes. So if you have a blaring question that you want to ask Shaun, please just pop it in the chat and we'll get to that in the Q&A section. But Shaun, second last question, mate. What does the coaching staff at the Hawks do to ensure that the players' skills are developed effectively?
Yeah, so there's probably two main things that are done. So the first one is there's some sort of analysis and evaluation of the roster that we have and what they can and can't do. And in the professional kind of landscape, you have guys for 1 year on 1 year deals. You might have guys on multi-year deals, where that's 2 or 3, and then there's somewhere between. So with some guys, you can put together a bit of a plan for a long period of time, whereas for some others, it might just be for the season. So it can be a little bit challenging. But nonetheless, it's look at the player that we have. What can they do and what can't they do? Okay, now let's put a plan together on how we're going to help that player. So I'm fortunate at the moment where, so we've got he was a development player last year and he's a rostered player with us this year. He's a New South Wales junior. His name's Calder Gack. So Jared, you'd be familiar with him. Penrith junior, represented New South Wales, gone across to the States, and now he's come across to us. And it's interesting. So last year as a development player, and then now this year rostered player. So Coach Gorgon comes back from the Olympics. He watches a few sessions. He sees Calder moving around. He watched him play at the Under-19 World Cup, and he's made some observations. And it's interesting. He goes, well, if he wants to play in the NBA, which is what Calder's ambitions are, he needs to be able to run the middle line. He needs to be able to get an offensive rebound. He needs a go-to post-move goal middle, and he needs a go-to post-move goal base, and then he needs a counter. Go work on those things with him. Okay, no worries. So now I put together a bit of a plan. These are the things that Calder needs to get done. He's rostered for the next kind of 2 years with us. So now it's all right. This is how we're going to do this on a day-to-day with Calder for the next 2 years. Now, the plan gets readjusted. It gets evaluated as it goes on. But there's an initial analysis and an evaluation. All right, he needs this. We put together a plan, and then we identify pockets of time during the week that we're able to service Calder to help him enhance and develop those skill sets. And a lot of the time that's done before practice. So it might be for 20 minutes before practice. It might be 20 minutes after practice, or he might come back in the afternoon like he did today, and he works on that little package for 20 minutes. Then there's things where the whole team needs to be good at it. So irrespective of how good they may be at this skill or not, we understand that shooting as a collective is something that we all need to be good at if we're going to have any sort of success in this league. So there is a significant amount of time that's invested in shooting the ball. And once again, so that's done in practice, it's done before practice, it's done after practice, it's done additional sessions in the afternoon. And that's something that's preached and done for an entire year. And I think that's what we try and do to help our players develop their skill effectively through an entire season. And then with that, there's then the video component. So if I'm working with a Calder on a go-to post move going middle, so let's just say it's a jump hook, I make edits of practice, I show them, then we make any sort of adjustment that we need to make in the next session that I have with him. And that's the type of process that we as a staff have followed, last season, and will probably continue to do this season. And then with that, the most important part, and I kind of should have led with this, I'm lucky that with a Calder, I've been lucky. I've known a Calder since he was 14. I've been involved with him in a state team. So when he first came in as a development player last season, there's a pre-existing relationship. There's 2-3 years there where we've known each other. Some of these other guys that come in, I'm a new face, they're a new face to me. And it would be unfair of me to tell you, at least for me, that I don't have to develop a relationship with these people before I even talk about skill and skill development. This saying's been around for, as long as I've been involved in basketball. Players don't care what you know until they know how much you care. So Daniel Greeter isn't going to be that invested in what I may have to say off the bat if he doesn't truly understand that I have his best interests at heart, and whatever plan I put or outline for him is what I think is going to help him become the best player. And then with that, there's an element of player input. Now it's different. I'm dealing with adults. It might be a little bit different with juniors, but there's some input from grown men about what they want to do. And then that's the battle. If they don't agree with what I may have to say, I've got to try and convince them that no, I think this is really important, and this is something that we need to work on, and this is why. Boom, 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 boom. And then there's a conversation and a dialogue. So yeah, we have a plan on how we want to develop skill, but the relationship component between the coach and the athlete, I think, is just as important as whatever type of drills that you might want to do with player A, B, or C on the court.
No, 100%. Strong message. And mate, last question before we take it to the floor. For any coaches here that are aspiring to reach that level, what advice would you provide these coaches?
Aspiring to coach at a professional level?
Yeah.
I read I'm not going to lie. I'm confident in my own abilities. I think I'm a good coach. And I think I've done a good job with teams that I've coached, and players that I've coached previously, and clubs that I've been involved with. But my net worth is my network. So if I don't have a strong network around me, it's going to be really hard to get anywhere. And this is where there's a fine line. You want to have genuine relationships with people without in the back of your mind thinking, well, how can this person help me 3 or 4, 5 years down the track? But that's how I got this job. And I'm not going to lie about it. I've known Jacob Jackomas for 6 years. We never actually worked together, and we had a lot of common friends in basketball, but I've known him for a long period of time. We've spoken a lot about basketball, and we've spoken about teams together. And then when this opportunity came up, he gives me a phone call, asks if I'm interested, team manager, assistant coach, first year, do you want to do it? There are people that are out there that are more capable or more talented than me, 100%. I'm not naive enough to think that that's not the case. But I had someone that I knew and had known for a long period of time, who had an opportunity come up in his network, and he knew me well enough where he thought, all right, I think this is a good opportunity for Shaun. So, being good with X's and O's and your basketball knowledge and all that, you have to have that if you want to be involved in professional basketball. Your ability to connect with athletes and have strong rapport, that's imperative. You need that to have the opportunity to be involved in professional basketball. You can't be a brick wall, regardless of whatever your intelligence may be. This is a relationship game. But like I said, your net worth is your network. And it's not just Jacob. It was when I was at Basketball in New South Wales, I was lucky enough to have a close friend and mentor in Peter Lonergan. And he pushed me down the path of coach education, coach development. And then that's how that job turned up in Basketball in New South Wales. It was through Peter Lonergan. Getting into the opportunity at the Hawks was through Jacob. So I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give to aspiring coaches, you've got to put yourself out there. If you want to be a professional basketball coach, you need to find a way to get involved with people that are involved in professional basketball. If you want to be a Division I college coach, you need to find a way to network and be around other NCAA coaches. If you want to be a state team head coach, you've got to have a strong relationship with the people at Basketball in New South Wales, your SPP head coach, whoever it may be. So, it sounds a bit funny. Like I said, X's and O's, ability to be relatable and personal with players, that stuff is paramount. You won't get a job if you can't do those things. But you also need to invest. I think you need to invest time in the relationships that you have and the types of people that you put yourself around. Because a byproduct of that is you are a product of your environment. So if you put yourself around good, talented basketball coaches, you'll feed off that. And in this kind of day and age where it's a lockdown in New South Wales, Zoom's great. We can do this. It's easy to jump on a Zoom with someone on the other side of the world or in another state, whereas perhaps in other times it might have been a little bit more difficult. It had to be a phone call. It had to be a text message. So I think for me, it's investing time into your network and the types of people that you want to put around you to help you get to where you want to go. That'd be my biggest piece of advice.
Well, thank you for sharing that, mate. We're gonna take it to the audience. We've got a couple minutes to go, so I'll choose a couple from the chat. There's a question here from Coach Heather that was repeated a couple times. What would you teach your players besides basketball? Is there any component outside of basketball that you would help them develop?
That's a good question. I think I have the answer. So Jared, you'll have to confirm, Juanita Weissensteiner, when's she speaking about self-regulation and goal setting? When's she speaking?
Yes.
Do you know off the top of your head?
Thursday towards players on self-regulation and goal setting.
Yeah. I think I'm a bit of a nerd. I'm not going to lie. So I like reading academic papers and books. And I was lucky enough to meet Juanita during my time at Basketball New South Wales. And she speaks about this concept of self-regulation. And she handed me this paper with an athlete that she had worked with previously. And she's now an author or a researcher. And she's a gold medalist in Olympic Games. And she did research on all the different other gold medalists and people that have that win and have high levels of success on an Olympic level, at a World Cup level, and what sets them apart from other athletes that might only come fifth or qualify but don't win. And the skill that she talks about is self-regulation and how the best of the best are highly self-regulated. Now, I wouldn't do it justice by trying to explain what that is. I mean, I have an idea of what it is in my mind, but I would encourage you to listen. For any young athlete or coach, that's where it's at. being highly self-regulated and understanding the value of setting goals, I think, is a skill in itself. And that is what I would encourage you to learn and get better at. So my understanding of self-regulation is there's so there's a stimulus, there's an issue, there's something that you're trying to do. So it might be I want to win a gold medal. Then there's a series of steps and plans that you put in place to achieve that. Then there's a reflection component at the end where you are evaluating the plan that you've put in place, and is it garnering the types of results that I think it's going to result in. And it's a continuum. So after you reflect, you reevaluate your goals and what you want to do, and then you adjust the processes that you have in place. Then you reflect again, and then it comes back around, and it's a continuous cycle. When I heard her speak about that, blew my mind. Try to read as much as I could about it. So yeah, to answer the question, understanding what self-regulation is, understanding how to develop that, and as a coach, try and teach it and impart it to young athletes, I think is really important. Yeah, I think it's great.
Excellent, mate. And I'll leave it to one more question, coaches. And for the coaches I miss in the chat, I apologise. But just in respect to everyone's time, Shaun, from a junior perspective, how have you approached kids to buy into what you were coaching, and everything from attitude, whether it's approach or focus, etc.
Good question. It's interesting. When I first started coaching, how I approach that is now very different. So now how I would do it is I would just ask the player. So if it was if I'm working someone out, individuals, and we're doing it once or twice a week, and we do it for a long period of time, I would ask that player, well, what do you want to do? What are your ambitions? What are your dreams with basketball? And then they would tell me. So they would say, I want to make a state team, or I want to be a Division 1 college player, or I want to play in the WNBL for the Sydney Flames, whatever it might be. Okay, great. So you have these ambitions. So now it's about shaping your attitude towards work and working out, and aligning it to those ambitions. So when you talk about buy-in and things like that, a lot of the time it's being able to hold someone accountable to something. So if I'm working someone out and they've told me that they want to make this under 18 state team as a bottom age athlete, and I'll keep it broad, they don't give me great effort in whatever we're doing, well, that's how I would hold that person accountable. Hey, Jared, I mean, I thought you told me you wanted to make a state team, and now you can't run and attack the glass, or you can't get your hips down and hold your hands up when I'm throwing you the ball for a catch and shoot shot. And it's that, but then it's also the constant conversation with said player, and this is that self-regulation part of assisting them in reflecting on, well, what are your goals? What are the processes we're going to put in place? All right, and then let's look back at them, in 3-4 weeks' time. So yeah, for buy-in, I think a lot of the time the player has to want to do it. If they don't want to do it, it's hard to get any sort of meaningful buy-in. You can get buy-in for let's win a championship, let's win a game, but those things are hard. And if that's the only reason why you're doing something, at times for certain people, it can become quite easy to not want to give great effort or not apply myself 100% to achieve said task. So I think being able to link it back to what the individual wants and what the individual is passionate about is paramount for ensuring that there's any sort of buy-in for what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and it really comes down to athlete focused and coach driven, and I love how you articulated that, mate. And coaches, just before we leave, Shaun, thank you so much for putting in the effort to share these thoughts with us. We can't appreciate your time enough. And I know there's probably a lot on your plate in this pre-season period. So thank you so much for your generosity and your time. And coaches, a big thank you to you for putting in the effort to develop yourself as coaches. It's so lucky we can still be able to develop ourselves, even though we're not on court. But there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. So thank you so much. Shaun, thanks again. Coaches, thanks again. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much for jumping on board.
Thanks for having me, Jared. Appreciate it.